from even just sitting and talking with him for 5 minutes, and I'm really glad that he can share for a longer time today. So give your hand for Kaady.
Thank you for your camera. Good.
Get our attention.
Can you hear me? Good enough?
Yeah.
So, hi everyone. Good to see you all. How's everybody?
Good, pretty good.
Is it good?
I know how I am.
You got jokes.
I'm reading you. Sound ominous, but who cares if I'm reading you or not? It's just not going to. Thank you. So.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. So the name of this talk is God Right Here. Please Look Again. And I have another title. It was interesting what Naomi just said about she's checking the clock already. About 4 years ago, Naomi and me and a few people, not too many, at the old church, we were finishing a meeting, and I said something, it just came out of me, and she wrote it down, which I was flattered, I guess, but also, gee, maybe that was something. And I keep thinking about it. That she wrote it down made me think about it a lot. And it was whatever you do, don't waste your life not becoming who you are, right?
Yeah.
Don't waste your life not becoming who you are. So I'm always in conflict because whenever I have to give a talk, I always have two things to talk about. Two really different things, I think. They're really not going to be easy to connect them. And they're quite far apart and one is very vertical and one is definitely horizontal. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
And so I'm an old member, and I had a good fortune of being in the Unification Church a long time. Am I supposed to stand away from where you're putting me?
No, you need to be close to the mic.
Oh.
We need the mic away from the speaker, so
Oh.
you're good now.
So I've been in the Unification Church a long time, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud of who I met, and that's true parents. And I've talked about it, so I don't want to talk too long about this. I have a lot of stuff, but I don't want to talk too much about that. But I'm really, and I'm not trying to be silly, and I'm not trying to get sympathy. But in reality, I'm an uneducated clown. I'm a clown. In school, I never studied, I didn't concentrate. I had a lot of friends because I was very funny. And there was another guy in my classes, his name was Eddie also. He was Italian, I was a Lebanese Eddie. Eddie Giannetti, his name was. And he and I were constantly competing for the class's attention, away from the teacher. That's how bad I was. And I'm a clown. Somehow I got to meet true parents, true father and true mother. I was 25 years old. By the time I was 25, I tried many things. All kinds of drugs, philosophies, religions, lifestyles. At 25, when I had come to, by the age of time of 25, I became quite exhausted, which is possible to do, you know. And I met true parents. And so, you know, we dedicated, many of our members, we dedicated our lives to very high ideals and high goals, and sacrificed ourselves, our personal lives, not concentrating on becoming who we are, particularly. At least that's the way I felt. Forget myself. I can't hold it. To forget myself, live for the sake of a higher purpose. And a magical thing happened. The more I denied myself, the more my individual self, can you hear me? You can't hear me? My individual self became stronger and defined my identity. Trying to deny myself, my identity, personal self-identity, became stronger. Does anybody have any experience with that? Does that make any sense? Maybe not.
Yeah.
I mean, when you live for the sake of others, as they say, you don't melt away. In reality, you become bigger, and you have a lot of resources to give to others. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So you know, living for the sake of a greater purpose, at the same time, you know, really, as an American, I really sincerely think it's not a good thing to waste our life not becoming who we are. But that's how you do it, in a way, is you deny yourself, and on the other, and you become stronger, and as an individual, you suffer for the sake of other people. I'm sympathetic, I understand, you know, we all can be very empathetic with people to the point where we become so exhausted and we suffer so much with trying to help others. And that happened too, so much to me. When I was working in my family, we were in Paraguay, we lived and died for our members. We lived and died many times, literally. What am I talking about? I mean, when young people join our movement, and we teach in divine principle about the history and the tradition of life, the lifestyle in that particular country, was young people not being loved by their parents, especially girls, not being able to finish school, and becoming pregnant at 14 or 15, and being accepted. We had young people living in our house, one young sister, who, you know, before we came to Paraguay, she was living with one other church family as kind of a maid. Well, not kind of, she was a maid. And that was her tradition. She was from way up north, what they call Chaco, way up north, Paraguay. And the parents, her father, who knows where it was, and the mother gave their child to this other member to take care of her. She works for them. They don't have to pay her, but they put her through school, something like that. Okay. So when we arrived, she no longer was living with them. She moved in with us. And man, I mean, please understand, I'm not trying to gain sympathy, but we lived and died for that. We lived and died for her. And she was really developing. She was going to school. She was doing better in school than my own children were, honestly. And studying computer science Then I was in the United States with some Paraguay members, and my wife was doing the best she could. Our family was still there, but I was here. And somebody climbed over the wall. We had this big wall. We had a seminary. We had many students living with us, or studying with us. Anyway, some guy climbed over the wall one night, snuck into her bedroom. And anyway, she became pregnant. And she was 15 years old. This little girl saved my son Jacob. Jacob was like this, baby. He wandered out beyond this wall. My wife was running around trying to find him. And this girl, she was so helpful in many ways. Found Jacob, brought him back. You know how kids wander. She was so great. But, by the time I got back, they'd taken her back up to her mother's house up north. And that was a way. It was expected, nobody was shocked. When you became 15, they had a big party for you, especially the girls, and now she was eligible to become a wife or a mother, So this happened so much, and so what I say, many times, and there was another young girl who was really working good with us. She ran away with another guy. It was very heartbreaking, honestly. I don't know if you can relate to this. But, dreams and ideals parents have for their children. And things can be quite disappointing. You don't stop loving them, of course. But, so, this song we sang, the second to the last song, The Heart of the Father, this is something that I've always been kind of emphasizing. And I feel like in some way the Unification Church is not emphasizing certain things lately. One of them is this, Mother talks about it, but it is this suffering heart of the parent, God. And people don't want to hear. We've been told, children of me have been told, that's really arrogant of you to say that God is suffering. How do you know that? And it's really, not an interesting thing to talk about, really. And I don't care. I joined this movement so amazed by this one thing that Reverend Moon was saying, is that he wanted to liberate the suffering heart of God. And we can all think about how to do that. But what an odd thing to talk about. I've looked for 40 years, almost 40 years. How many other people are talking about the suffering heart of God, defining God's heart of God's experience as a being that is disappointed and is suffering, and is working to try to liberate humankind, and that Reverend Moon said we should work not to liberate humankind first, but to liberate the parent God. What kind of religion is that? What kind of philosophy is that? That's not common. And I love so much all the people that have been studying with us over the years, and we're studying with them, and I've learned a lot from Jean, Sister Jean back there, and I really sincerely mean it. She and I had some kind of shocking arguments. So what kind of arguments? She got upset with me a couple of times, and probably will again. And she's a lovely person, and is just what she is, a mystic. She's had mystic experiences from childhood, and she's a living embodiment of some of the things that we talk about in theory. She's experienced it. But there's some things that, there are many things that I relate to, and as a member of our movement, that I feel that she's talking about too. So there's some things that are not so unique in reality in our movement, teaching. But this odd thing about it, the oppressive heart, the oppressed heart of God, it makes, for me, God very close. God is right here. God right here. Anyway, I'm going to try to sing this song, but if I don't do it very well, I might stop and just read it, because it's... First I'm going to do... Anyway, this is called Please Look Again. It's got 5 verses. The looking glass is broken. The looking glass needs remaking. Please look again. Please look again. There are many things you have never known about me. My story has not been told. My face is unknown. Please look again. I became paralyzed by heartbreak. I was paralyzed, my heart ached. I could not even stand. I could not even see. I also fell so deep. I fell so deep. I could not breathe. But I could not forget you. No, I could not forget you. Please look again. Please look again. The anger reported, the anger recorded was mostly prophet's anger, was mostly prophet's anger. Because of the fault, I became a stranger. Because of the fault, we began to look for each other. Please look again. Please listen to the dream I had of you. We lived together and we became each other. Oh, my dream untold, my face unknown. Please look again. Please look again. One more thing to say. Please look again. I sent 2 people, not just one. I sent 2 people, not just one. I sent my daughter as well as my son. I sent my daughter as well as my son. I sent 2 people, not one. Please look again. Oh, please look again. Thank you. Thanks for tolerating that. So, how much more time I got? Father Moon, to confirm what I'm talking about. He said, now I started that thing off by saying, you've never known me, you've never known me. When I first wrote that down, that is so damn arrogant. All Christianity, so many religions, all of us, they know God, we know God, we've been talking about God for centuries and centuries and centuries. You've never known me? What an arrogant statement. We know God, but there's so much we don't, in my opinion, there's so much that we have not known about God. I can't help it. So, Father Moon said too, I used to just believe this because he said it, but now I'm convinced. God is in the process of restoration. He is not in his original state as God. Rather, he is a God of sorrows, a God who deserves to be consoled. He is not the God of joy, but of despair. So, you know, you should maybe heard, I had this hernia operation. And my brother, last year, had a stroke. And I've been thinking about God as had a stroke, in a way. Because that's why I said, you know, I could not see God. So Father Moon said that God was like paralyzed after the fall. He was just devastated, so painful with the loss of his dream, his children. And it wasn't just like, oh, send Jesus. It was shocking. And it was so disappointing. What the archangel seducing Eve. So God was paralyzed. This said, tears are flowing from God's eyes. Red blood is surging in his heart. Yet the blood vessels through which his blood should be flowing are clogged. And he is brought, and Father said, God is brought low. I also fell so deep. God is was brought low, as if at the point of death. God. I think it has affected the entire universe. That God, the Creator, went through all that. It has affected all that God has created, including us. We're a part of that. Then, Father Moon, this very odd person, says, I am resolved to liberate this suffering God. How can we not admire him? He's a fool. That's a foolish thing. Foolish thing to say. Hey, I am resolved to liberate this suffering God. We've been a hard enough time being happy ourselves. We're having a hard enough time raising one family, to raise one family. We have so many problems. We have so many issues with our own families, our own children. It's hard work. He's talking about, I am resolved to liberate this God from suffering. What an odd person is. Actually, I'm not too far off from being done. Children inherit their parents' flesh and blood. Now this is something I asked Kevin when Kevin is Sukon visited me at the hospital a couple of weeks ago. I said, is it crazy? Is it crazy to say I feel sorry for God? In the introduction, Divine Principle, two parents talk about the ideal world. In the ideal world, we will not hurt each other. We will not commit sin. We will not offend others. Because we will feel God's suffering if we do that. And therefore we won't. I used to give these talks. Is it possible for human beings to empathize? Empathy is a word that's flying around. It's not so popular anymore all of a sudden. It went away. It goes away with all the other things. Insuk gave a great talk on empathy a couple of years ago. I loved it. I got so much from it. Maybe more than she thought anybody might. I don't know. That's okay. But anyway, and Randy, our brother Randy, talked about empathy. Gave a talk about it. And he said something really unique. He talked about it, and it was almost off the cuff. I mean, off the cuff. He said, he was talking about empathizing with, well, who do we empathize with? Each other, our brothers and sisters, people, poor people, you know, suffering people around the world. We empathize with our friends. But he mentioned something odd. He said, empathizing with old people. And then he said, empathizing with leaders. Nobody likes leaders. We don't like leaders. We don't even think about them suffering. A couple of days ago, Shoda came out of the kitchen. We're having a break at our company. Came out of the kitchen. I said, "How are you, Shoda?" And he started to tell me how he was. Because you know, Shoda's always worrying about, concerned with, helping, trying to serve others, us. And maybe I've asked him, how are you before, and he told me, he started to tell me how he was, but I didn't hear it. But I heard it a little bit. Oh, well, you know, you know how he always talks about toxic thoughts? You heard him talk about, who's heard him talk about toxic thoughts? Yeah. He's really, what is it? Sometimes I wonder, he's told me that so many times, toxic thoughts. He suffers with toxic thoughts. You're a terrible person, you're terrible, nobody loves you, God hates you, you're a failure, you make so many mistakes, you're failing, you're not doing a good job, you're ugly, you're stupid, you shouldn't be here. Worse than that, you know. You shouldn't, you know, how many people have you hurt? I mean, he's got a list of people that and I know a few, you know, who hate him. Shoda.
How could that?
Hate him. Talk about him behind his back. Talk to other people. Talk to leaders about him behind his back. Up in the, you know, headquarters. So, you know, he's struggling. This guy is a really good guy. He's so good. I was in the meeting when Michael was there. Do you know the Shoda at one point was offered by True Mother to take a new mission to go to Hawaii. Yes. To be in Hawaii, man. I brought that up. I said, this guy could have been in Hawaii. Last week I was talking about it. He could have went to Hawaii. And Michael did something you don't do in the Unification Church. You say, no, I don't want the leader to change his mission. Don't leave. Stay, Shoda-san. We don't want you to leave. Michael, that's our tradition. Whatever the boss says, the leader says, you got to do it. Michael, I don't know if he knows that or doesn't know or don't care, but he said, you know, he loves Shoda, and I love Shoda because he cares about us. But we don't, you know. So anyway, he convinced, and you know, once I caught the supporting, don't leave, yeah. But Michael really initiated it. Don't leave, Shoda, stay. I mean, So we do need him, but you know, he's struggling all the time. So we need to listen to the old man. We need to listen to the leaders, even so-called bad leaders. Listen to them. Listen to the old people. He got a lot of things to say. They've been through a lot. We've got a lot of old people here, you know. I are one. So the children inherit their parents' flesh and blood. That is why when their mother sheds tears, they should be able to connect with her and weep with her. You can hear me?
Yes.
When their father sheds tears and sorrow, they should naturally be able to sympathize with him. And yet, how difficult it has been for God to raise and nurture his children to feel that way, sympathize toward him. No matter how much God weeps, human beings ignore his tears. No matter how sorrowful he is, human beings do not feel his sorrow. So that's why I ask a question, funny question. Is it strange or is it stupid? Or is it, what did I say? Is it crazy to feel sorry for God? I mean, intellectually, we're all members of the teaching. No. That's right, that's good. But really? So then, all right, almost finished. So in the last part of this, whatever this thing is one more thing to say. I sent 2 people, not 1. I was in the hospital. Man, I'm telling you, between my wife, took care of me so good and took care of all the things that were going on. I was in there for 5 days. This is a crazy hernia. It wasn't like other times you go home the next day or that day. I was there for 5 days. I still don't know exactly. And 3 days, I don't even remember being there. I went in on Sunday and I woke up conscious Wednesday from a hernia.
Wow.
And I was just flabbergasted. My wife, you missed Christmas. I said, Christmas, what? But I sent 2 people, not 1. I sent my daughter. Now, isn't that right? God sent his daughter. Who are you talking about? Mrs. Moon? Well, first I'm talking about Eve. I sent my daughter as well as my son. I sent 2 people, not 1. What a crazy world this has been we're living in. We don't know who God is. He sent 2 people, not just Adam. He's been dominating for various reasons for a long time. So then Mrs. Moon comes along. So now I'm going to read this. It's 5 pages, but it's not long. Now, does anybody, I want to ask a question. Does anybody read Applied Unificationism, the blog Applied? Has anybody seen it?
Yeah.
1, 3, Kevin, I you? No? Oh my goodness. 3, 4, how many are here? Applied Unificationism. It's the people like Kevin, so seminarians who are writing. You still can't hear me, Gene?
I can hear you.
Seminarians and graduates from Sun Moon University, the intellectuals, and the philosophers, and the poets, and the artists of our movement are writing applied in this blog called Applied Unification. So this brother Robert Kittle, he's a very hardworking missionary in Nepal. Anyway, I'm going to read this article he wrote, okay? Because God sent two people, not one. It's called Solving Unsolvable Problems. There's some of us that have struggled with some of the things that he's talking about here. But I really like his response. True Mother, called, as unification is called, Dr. Hak Jahan Moon, wife of the late Reverend Sun Myung Moon. After this, I'm just going to stop, okay? Wife of the late Sun Myung Moon, Reverend Sun Myung, recently concluded her World Summit tours. The first continental level event was held in January 2018 in Senegal, Africa, and the last in December in Kathmandu, Nepal. The hallmark of these summits, as well as programs in Korea, Japan, and America, was her proclamation that she is the only begotten daughter of God. Only begotten daughter of God. Whoa! Man, does that blow people's minds. What an arrogant statement. Say it, think it. That's what you all think. Some people do. The only begotten daughter of God. She wanted to make this bold statement on the world stage and in front of heads of state and government, as well as distinguished leaders in all fields, including both the first and last summits. 8 sitting presidents, prime ministers were there, monarchs attended. Additionally, in the audiences were former heads of state and government, deputy prime ministers and vice presidents, government ministers, speakers, members of parliament, elected officials, other high-level dignitaries, along with eminent religious leaders. It was a collective victory for God by us all. In announcing she is God's daughter at these summits, True Mother is solving one of the most critical problems of our time. In societies around the world and throughout history, women have been raped. Women have been trafficked in prostitution, beaten at home, murdered, unwillingly impregnated, and forced into life-threatening abortions, mostly when the fetus in their womb was known to be female. The solution to the way we mistreat women will never be fully addressed through the power of police, the numbers of prisons, the verdicts of courts, more laws, or even the fear of capital punishment. These have been tried, but the problem remains unsolved. The lasting solution is a fundamental change of attitude towards women, incorporated in a new heart and culture. We need something original and innovative, something never thought of or done before, and that's the truth. Really, especially on the level that she's speaking at, to worldwide stage. Okay? To worldwide proclamation this. I'll read it again. The lasting solution is a fundamental change of attitude toward women, incorporated in a new heart and culture. We need something original and innovative, something never thought of or done before. No woman in history ever proclaimed on a global stage that she was God's only begotten daughter. No woman ever invested so many resources in making this bold statement. True Mother's investment of financial and human resources is unparalleled. At the age of 76 years old, she is investing all her energy. For older people, extensive travel, changing time zones to distant locales, and walking through long airport corridors is very difficult. Her summits are not for the purpose of self-proclamation. They are problem-solving on a historical level. Mother Moon is risking her position, which is more difficult than walking through airports. She's risking her position, and you know that. How much criticism she's getting to this day by people who we love and respect, and who we don't love and respect, but they're criticizing her. This is not a purpose of self-proclamation. They are problem-solving on a historical level. Mother Moon is risking her position and the reputation of the worldwide organizations she represents, many she personally founded, to provide a much-needed answer to the critical problems related to changing our attitude towards and treatment of women. Her declaration is a cosmic game changer. This is exactly what needs to happen. It is an entirely new approach, a new understanding and attitude towards women, where we begin to honor our daughters, where we begin to honor our sisters, wives, and mothers in the highest possible way by acknowledging what? The divine feminine nature intrinsic in them. The divine. What if husbands thought of their wives as God's daughters? What if husbands thought of their wives as God's daughters? God right here is the name of my talk. What if women thought of themselves as the daughters of God? Oh my goodness. As a man, I see so many girls, they don't think of themselves clearly as God's daughters. They think of themselves as strippers. What if brothers controlled themselves? Not just to avoid disease or impregnating a woman, but to protect their sisters as the embodiment of the feminine essence of God's divinity. What if children were raised knowing they and their siblings are sons and daughters of God? Even angels in the spiritual world would benefit from this revolutionary way of thinking initiated here on earth. Sadly, this mindset and heart did not emerge at the very beginning of human history. Instead, we inherit a legacy of selfishness that permeates our sexual thinking and behavior still today. Adam did not see Eve as God's daughter. Adam did not see Eve as God's daughter. Eve did not see herself as the daughter of God. The archangel looked at the first woman as a sex object for personal pleasure and a way to supplant God's heavenly lineage. This egocentric, sex-centered attitude towards women is not only the origin of our problems historically, but also central to some of the most ubiquitous problems we currently face. Whether pedophilia in religious institutions, sexual harassment, which now has become publicly known through the Me Too movement, the free sex movement of the 1960s, the same-sex movement today, or the disintegration of families at the core of these unsolved social problems is the confusion related to the dignity of women, and correlated to this, the lack of understanding of the proper role of human sexuality. This is at the root of our fallen nature, culture, and lineage. True Mother is not a theologian. I think she is. True Mother is not a theologian, he says. She has said so herself. Her declaration as God's only begotten daughter cannot be understood by dissecting her words. The big picture of that Mother Moon is sharing with us her upbringing, her life as a refugee during the Korean War, her Korean heritage, her motherhood, bearing 14 children, and ultimately her victory of being side by side with her husband, true father, Father Moon, for 52 years. Her victory of knowing she embodies the feminine divinity of God was her constant internal strength. She is sharing this victory on a global stage, telling each and every person of the inherent value, ultimate purpose, and utmost integrity of womanhood. That's what she's doing. In declaring, "I am the only begotten daughter of God," True Mother is establishing a new benchmark. She is setting the record straight as the unique position of women based on God's original principle of creation. In fact, she is also sharing with us the entire history of the providence of restoration. It's pretty deep. The human fall was the inability to recognize the human fall was the inability to recognize Eve as God's only begotten daughter. Likewise, the culmination of human history is the advent of God's first triumphant daughter, sister, wife, and mother. The culmination of human history is the advent of God's first triumphant daughter, sister, wife, and mother. Dr. Moon is addressing what happened at the beginning of human history. Why didn't Adam, Eve, or the archangel understand Eve's divinity? From where would they have learned this? A few more paragraphs. Who would have taught them that Eve was God's begotten daughter? This could only come from God himself. God knew who Eve was. Adam did not. If the archangel knew anything about it, he surely did not share that with Eve when she asked about the meaning of the commandment, "Do not eat." Clearly, no one but God could have taught this concept to our first human ancestors. Then why didn't God teach that? And why didn't our first human ancestors understand Eve's value and position? In True Mother's recent speeches, this is another unique thing about our movement, teaching, is human responsibility like no one has ever taught. You know, there used to be this minister in Chicago, and he said he hated that painting by Michelangelo of God creating Adam. God is like, you remember that painting? God is like reaching out with his finger. And Adam is like laying back with a limp hand and a little bit of his finger. Touch me, God. Touch me, Jesus. I don't know. And he said he didn't like that because we cannot transform ourselves in this world without human effort. No one has ever taught the value to God of human beings like Reverend Moon is teaching. We cannot be God's image without a lot of effort on our part. God has given us everything it takes, the resources, the internal God in us. God right here. So that's why I always love the existentialists, the ones that said, man has responsibility. Man, they said, you know, the ones who were negative, they say, you know, man is cursed with freedom. It's not a curse, but it feels like it's a curse. Because we're responsible. What the biggest thing about the image of God, being the image of God, is we're responsible, like God is responsible. In declaring, in True Mother's recent speech, she is clear. She is emphasizing that selfishness or a lack of filial heart preceded the misuse of sex. In Vienna, Austria, she said, the speech, Peace Starts With Me, she said, Adam and Eve had not fully matured, we know that, and they developed selfishness. Or she used the word greed. Some people struggle with it. Greed. And she means self-centeredness. Greed. They develop greed. Due to that, the fallen human beings of today who have no connection to God were born. A year earlier in Bangkok, Thailand, at the international launching of Youth and Students for Peace, she explained that our first human ancestors felt and experienced greed before they could become ancestors of humankind. They ended up having self-centered hearts. I'm reading this book about Narcissus. That's another popular word. A couple years ago, the big word was empathy. Now it's, he's such a narcissist. Oh, he's such a narcissist. You know, I hear it all. We're all narcissists, and we started to be narcissists. That's how we start out as children. Who do we love? Me. My image. The problem with Narcissus was he was introduced to others who loved him. And his mistake was that he didn't care. He failed to turn and look at who loved him, someone outside of himself. He was in love with his image. He could have found his image forever and ever and ever in who he loves and what he loves, and grow and develop. The image, the mirror. I'm interested in mirrors now so much. Most recently, the Asian Pacific, she began mentioning that during this process of the growing period, Adam and Eve became greedy and made the world of today, which has no connection to God. In other words, greed, self-centered hearts, led to the misuse of love, which in turn then created the lineage of Satan and disconnected this world from its creator, God. In the Garden of Eden, God gave Adam the commandment, do not eat. The content was important, but opening up lines of communication, this is the big point. The content, do not eat, was important, but opening up lines of communication between God and his children was more important than the content itself. That's true for us now. The laws is one thing, it's important. But there's this other thing that religion has, one way or the other, or judgmental parents have done, is that this is the law, this is what's right and what's wrong. But we all fail to do what's right and wrong so many times. So every day where I'm working, things don't work out exactly the way they're supposed to. So listen to people's problems, listen to why they said. Sometimes they got good reasons, sometimes they got crazy excuses for why they can't do what's right. But first we have to listen to them and help and guide them to do the right thing. Do the right thing. You know, forgive. Give people another chance. But if they lie and BS and pretend like everything is fine or they didn't make a mistake, there's no channel of communication over that, right? Is that jumping too far? We have to recognize. If I'm going to change, if I need to change and become happy, at first I got to recognize what some of my own mistakes or weaknesses. It ain't easy. But, so it became self-centered, like a misuse. The commandment, do not eat, I'm almost done. The content, do not eat, was important, but opening up lines of communication between God and his children was more important than the content itself. According to the biblical account, after receiving God's instruction, Adam did not in any way acknowledge what he received. There was a no 10-4 between Adam and God. 10-4, Lord, I hear you. Get right back to you. A reply in a walkie-talkie communication, meaning understood.
Yes.
10-4. No question about its meaning. No, Adam, there's no record of Adam going, all the great saints and sages of history. I'm studying St. Augustine. He had faith, but he was asking a million questions all the time. We gotta ask. We gotta communicate. We gotta reach out. Don't just suffer and do on with endlessly destructive things. No question of Adam didn't ask, what do you mean don't eat the fruit? No inquiry.
for more information. No, nothing. On her part, Eve had questions about the commandment, but she asked the archangel, not God. We heard that before.
Yep.
She asked the archangel. Almost got it. God did not want the conversation to end after giving them the commandment. He wanted it to begin. Sadly, however, neither of our first human ancestors developed a free, open, and honest conversation with God. There were many things he wanted to share with them. In explaining to Adam and Eve why they should not have sex during their growing period, the conversation could have easily and naturally turned to God, clarifying that Eve was his daughter. The commandment, therefore, would mean much more than sexual self-control. It would be the beginning of a relationship with God. God's commandment to Adam meant he would be entrusted with the protection of God's daughter. Adam's responsibility was to keep Eve safe. In this way, prepare her for marriage. While she is growing to maturity, Eve would have come to recognize through talking with God that her position was to be the mother of all humankind. She was to create, along with her husband, God's lineage on the earth. But this type of education could only come from God, no one else. Because the first human ancestors did not have an ongoing communication with God, they never learned about Eve's true identity and value. The value of woman is not bestowed on them by men or angels. It comes from God alone. Right, Jeanette? You were saying that almost this morning. No response means no communication. No communication means no give and take action. No give and take action means no energy to keep the commandment, and ultimately no relationship with God. In this regard, Mother Moon correctly identifies greed, self-centered heart, or lack of hyojin as the root of the problem at the beginning of human history. Extreme individualism is also seen as the underlying cause of secularism, family breakdown, sexual chaos. Clearly, there was no free-flowing communication between God and the first human ancestors. No lines of communication between God and his children, meaning spiritual death. The fall was not just sexual. It began with the undocumented me first or only me movement. Me first or only me movement in the Garden of Eden, which destroyed the ideal of creation. True Mother's teaching and her emphasis on God as our heavenly parent and proclamation of being God's only begotten daughter are inextricably linked together. Focusing on the meaning of this word in Korean word, hyojin, is more than just how we treat our parents. The traditional concept of filial piety in Confucianism. Filial piety, three more paragraphs. Filial piety focuses on and is limited to a child's love and respect for his or her parents. What Mother was talking about, on the other hand, declares that I must not only honor my parents with filial piety, but also honor them in the way I treat my brothers and sisters, by the way I treat my spouse, and in the way parents raise children and grandchildren. We can always say that this kind of filial piety in 6 relationships, parents and children, brothers and sisters, and husband and wife. Obviously, this kind of filial piety goes far beyond and is much deeper than filial piety. This is probably why Dr. Moon felt compelled to coin a new term. At her advanced age, when many people would retire, True Mother is traveling around the world, offering a solution to the most serious social problems of our time. In declaring her daughtership to God, she is liberating all women. At the same time, she is educating all men. In essence, she is asking all of us to change our attitudes towards ourselves and especially towards women. Both men and women need to understand the true identity of women as the daughters of God.